Welcome to the Daily Agenda. There'll always be an England, apparently. Well, in actual fact, there won't. By the 2060s, 2070, there will be no England in the context of being a white English majority. What it will be called thereafter, one dreads to think, but it certainly won't be England, will it? Perhaps it'll be renamed Region 41 with a free speech code stamped Article 101, as in Room 101. That's the future of so-called England if it persists on this current course, this trajectory towards absolute oblivion. Absolutely. You know, let's not pretend for 1 minute that England was simply created in 927 by Athelstan. On the contrary, the tribes that formed England, kingdoms of England, existed for millennia before that. And they didn't always live on the British Isles. They lived in Europe, what we know today as Germany, and Denmark, Friesland, Holland, southern Scandinavia. That's the truth of the matter. That's where the English actually come from. Englishness, however, has transformed across the ages, has it not? Particularly since the Battle of Hastings, when the pseudo-French aristocracy took over England and started to transform it into the nation that it later became, on the unstoppable path towards empire building, which brought us to this current state of disaster. And let's not pretend it's anything other than a disaster, because that is exactly what it is. And now there's a great presumption here, a misunderstanding, I would say, which is widely promulgated by the English, that it's all the fault of those foreigners. It's the fault of foreign occupation government. Well, foreign occupation government is completely toxic. We know that. We've seen it, its true teeth, really, since Blair came to power. That's when we could truly say that HM government was a foreign occupation government, solely working for the aims of the globalists, the World Economic Forum, which was quite silent at that time. It sat in the background. Now, not so. Starmer admits, that he'd rather be at Davos than here in Westminster. I'd rather he'd be in a prison cell, quite frankly, doing life for treason, because he is a traitor. And he's broken, several articles of the Treason Felony Act. That much is without doubt. He's a lawyer, he should know that. Not a very good defence, is it, to say that I had no idea, I was just following orders from Klaus Schwab. Yes, well, that routine was dispensed with at Nuremberg, wasn't it? Just following orders, and we're not going to accept that defence from anyone when we've won this battle. But first of all, we have to win this battle. And key to winning the battle is actually understanding English culture and the future of England, and above all, where it all went wrong. So blaming foreigners, the foreign subversive elements that have taken root in this country, who have absolutely no connection to England or Englishness, and in actual fact, so many of them deeply, vehemently hate England and Englishness, the Narinder cows of this world, and all the other race-baiting grifters. There's so many of them. I'd be here for an hour naming all of them. So let's not go through that. But she has become the most notorious of the lot. It's shite, it's done, she said about England. Fair enough, yeah, that's why she needs to be remigrated. I said this before. Everyone like Narinder Kaur needs to be remigrated, and it needs to be an absolute priority. Not, okay, let's just focus on a few thousand illegal boat invaders. Let's get rid of the source of the problem first. The toxic subversives. Once they are seen to be deported, then believe me, that will change things dramatically. But for the English to continue saying, this nonsense of we were never asked, that's nonsense. It really is, it's truly nonsense. And it is untrue. That's why I say it's nonsense. Because in truth, the English were asked, were they not, at every general election. And where did it really go tits up? Some people would say, well, it was not listening to Enoch Powell or the National Front. It definitely went tits up with Margaret Thatcher in 1979 when she seduced the English electorate primarily with promises of, oh, we're going to crack down on immigration, and then flooded the country with immigration. That's what the Tories have always done. The Tories have brought more immigrants into this country than Labour, okay? The Tories are far more responsible for it. They're far more toxic and destructive. They are the epitome of globalism, okay? So anybody still clinging to some Tory fantasy of the Robert Jenrick nature, the man who boasted about opening more migrant hotels and then going to the Bell Hotel at Epping and saying it's a great victory. A great victory because they closed down one of the hotels that he opened. I mean, it takes a special kind of stupid, doesn't it, to swallow that? And that special kind of stupid is prevalent across the whole of England. So how the English hope to survive when they're suffering from this stupidity, it just beggars belief, quite frankly. And I guess another act of stupidity was someone, a centre-right clown, came on to this channel last night and commented that, oh, well, you didn't ought to criticise Carl Benjamin because he's the gateway drug to nationalism. I don't know what drugs that person has been taking, but I would advise a new prescription, different medication, because the current medication clearly is not working. It's having a very bad effect on his ability to perceive reality as it exists in the real world, that is. And Carl Benjamin most definitely is not the gateway drug to nationalism, never has been and never will be. And the vast majority of people in this country today who regard themselves as nationalists did not become so by watching Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, aka, and the Lotus Eaters. And that is just fact. Where they get these ideas from, I'm really not sure at all. I don't remember Carl Benjamin ever sending thousands of recruits to the British National Party, the most seriously successful nationalist organisation in British political history. In fact, he was quite toxic and has said repeatedly on the Lotus Eaters, well, now we've seen off the BNP threat. Who's we? Who's we? Does he mean the centre-right? The centre-right didn't see off the BNP threat. Nick Griffin dismantled the British National Party in a deal with the establishment. We've covered this matter repeatedly. That's another one of their delusions, okay? And the other delusion about we weren't asked, well, I'm not going to knock on doors across this country and feed the English with this fantasy that they were not asked and they've been robbed. The English robbed themselves, okay, and they were asked, and they were particularly asked at the Brexit referendum, and they didn't enforce it, which is something I said when I was the leader of Stronger Out in November 2016. Now comes the most difficult part, the enforcement programme. And if the British are not prepared to do it, primarily the English, then it simply will not happen. And that's exactly what happened. They got Brino, because yet again they trusted in another globalist clown, Boris Johnson, aided and abetted by French Farage, the Eugenio, just to rub it in a little bit. And anyone who's, or any English person or anyone in England who's thinking along the lines of, well, I'm just going to wait until 2029 and then Farage is going to save the country. Believe me, see this field behind me, in about 3 to 4 weeks' time, once the weather's turned and there's lots more rain, there'll be lots of magic mushrooms in said field, and I would advise you to go and munch on those mushrooms, because in truth you'll get more sense from taking magic mushrooms than you will from believing Nigel Farage is going to save the country with deep fake reform. And anyone who believes that, quite frankly, really must be taking magic mushrooms already. Maybe they have a stock dried from previous years, you know. I don't know. I don't care to know, quite frankly. But what I do know is that they are rooted in a magic mushrooms type delusion. And it's the same type of delusion that dictates this ridiculous thinking about Carl Benjamin is the gateway drug to British nationalism. I think the drug you've been taking is magic mushrooms out of fields like that, and you need to stop. And if your doctor's prescribing you medication of that nature, then there's something wrong with your GP. Is it an English GP? You know, I couldn't resist that one either. But in truth, England, yes, it has no future if it doesn't get a grip of itself. If the English don't get a grip of themselves, they have no future. No future at all. I mean, there was a protest a few weeks ago, just up the road at Sutton in Nottinghamshire. And it's about 6 miles away from here, I've never seen such a pathetic bunch of cuckolds in my entire life. Oh no, please, when interviewed, please don't think that we're racist, because we're not racist at all. Oh no, we love immigrants. I've got loads of black mates, I love my black mates. What is it with these people? You see, this is the point I'm making. And this is leading us to the central point of tonight's podcast. England is a white country. The English are white Europeans. If you love your black mates, yeah, so much so that you hate white English people who are fighting for ethno-nationalism, for example, then you've got a serious problem here, just as bad as SUTA and Hope Not Hate and all the other communist groups. Because in truth, that's how I see them. And that demonstration and the video footage from it 6 miles away was so cringe. It made me ashamed to think that these people regarded themselves as English. They were absolutely pathetic, truly. And I can tell you that 30 odd years ago, when I used to campaign in that area with the British National Party, the people of Nottinghamshire then were nowhere near as cuckolded and craven as they are now today. And all of these people have elected deep fake reform. They're living in that magic mushroom fantasy of Nigel the Saviour, descended from the heavens, okay? Coming to save poor little England. Nigel Farage is not going to do anything of the sort. His migration policy is just replacement migration. It's nonsense, all of it. The man does more U-turns than a driving instructor, and quite frankly, anybody who pays attention to him, and I do, you can literally get seasick just monitoring all of the U-turns, because it's one after the other, after the other, after the other, and in the end, you feel like you've been on a ship doing this. Is that making you dizzy? Well, it's not making his clowns dizzy, are they? Because they're just as bad as Tommy's clowns. And that's another thing, Tommy. Yes, Tommy, the man with an Irish passport, descendant from Fenians. He's proud of being descended from Fenians. Makes no bones about it. Attended the funeral of an IRA terrorist with his cousin Kev Carroll. And apparently is regarded as an English nationalist. That is definitely an example of magic mushroom thinking. That is the dire state of the English today. So many of them have been suckered into believing this phony nationalism is going to save them. So the little flag rebellion on the 13th of September. Now there'll be a few speakers there and a few singers and a few transgender people again, I would imagine, because that's one of Tommy's usual stunts. And he'll have a litany of black and Asian people on the stage telling everyone that they're English and proud to be English and they love England and racism has no place in our society, man. You get the point I'm making? These people are not English. They have lost any cultural identity or even association with a proper cultural identity. So they're always going on about 927 and Athelstan. Well, let me tell you something. In 927, when Athelstan formalised the nation of the creation of England, not one of them were non-white, okay? And forget this nonsense drama at this moment in time. I've watched a couple of episodes of it, King and Conquest on BBC, in which some of the characters are played by people of mixed race and there's a peppering of black Africans. Yes, of course, it's the woke disease again, the woke mind virus. There were no non-whites at the Battle of Hastings either. And, to portray Earl Morcar of Mercia, which is that behind me, that's the Kingdom of Mercia. Okay? For those who don't know. For those who aren't in touch with their true English heritage, that is the Kingdom of Mercia. The Midlands, once notorious as the Mercian supremacy. Okay? In other words, it was the most powerful kingdom in England. So, yes, Earl Morcar, my goodness, honestly, it's sickening and astonishing. It's about as bad as Jarl Arkon in Vikings Valhalla. And we're supposed to just tolerate this garbage. And I find it a cross between irritating and sickening watching this stuff. But I watch it basically for the sake of historical accuracy and intrigue. and at times just to have a good laugh, you know. And yeah, it's mirth making in many ways. The BBC has wrecked what could have been a truly brilliant period drama, but you know, that's what they're doing. They're wreckers, aren't they? And the people in the centre right, they're just as bad as the left as wrecking, because they are a left-wing faction. So I would say this to those who keep saying, oh, the Lotus Eaters, they're as close to nationalism as you can get. Are they? I've never seen any evidence of that at all. And the main problem with the Lotus Eaters is really, to borrow an Americanism, they don't know whether to shit or go blind, quite frankly, in the context of nationalism. You see, they ape and imitate nationalist thinking and ideology just to draw people into the safety valve operation. But they themselves never commit themselves to the nationalist path. They never support nationalism, and they often rant about ethno-nationalism. So, in truth, they're not nationalists. They're certainly not ethno-nationalists. What are they? People couldn't say they're not centre-right. Well, what are they then? If they're not nationalists, they're not ethno-nationalists, and they're not centre-right, what are they? Aliens from another planet? At times, you might think so, listening to them, quite frankly. That's what I think of them. Because they just cannot speak directly. They're not straight. They're not shooting from the hip. They refuse to admit what they really are. You know? And Bo Dade, oh dear, honestly. And Carl Benjamin, Connor Tomlinson, ugh, no thank you. No thank you at all. And these are the people who claim to be the font of wisdom about Englishness. Absolutely, yeah. How did that happen? How did that ever happen? Because these people can't even commit themselves to nationalism. They can't even commit themselves to their own ethnic identity, whilst waffling nonsense about ethnic identity and that the English are an ethnic tribe. Are they not? So a Scotsman contacted me last night on here and said, the current state of Scotland is so appalling, I'm ashamed to be Scottish, effectively. And I feel the same way about England most of the time, mate, to be honest with you, because of the English, truly. And he said, but I've done DNA tests, autosomal, cross-matched to ancient DNA, and I have an Anglo-Saxon ancestor. And does that mean I can qualify to be English? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But of course he qualifies to be English. If he can match to an Anglo-Saxon skeleton, once living, breathing Anglo-Saxon, then of course he can be English. Can he not? But, you know, somebody born on the Indian subcontinent to Indian parents, Asian, who just rocks up here at the invitation of the foreign occupation government to complete the process of ethnic cleansing of the English, which will then lead to the ethnic cleansing of the Welsh, the Irish and the Scottish, being no doubt about that whatsoever for all the plastic Celts who hate England. When England falls, you fall with it. You're finished. Because England is the bedrock of the British Isles. And if you don't like it, go and choke on your own bile in your bedroom or whatever. Maybe you can make some videos telling us how much you hate England and the English. Because you're going down the shit pan with England. Guaranteed. You are going down the same shit pan of England. And when England falls, you fall with it. Okay? Get used to the idea. That is the significance of England in the context of the British Isles. So the Scotsman, now an honorary Englishman. That's what I said to him last night. Of course he can be English. And he has more right to claim English ancestry because he has an Anglo-Saxon relative buried here in Engelonda. An Indian from the Indian subcontinent has no ancestors here. An African from the vast African continent has no English ancestors here. Okay? Not one. And they can waffle and rant all they want about slavery. It was the British Empire that brought slavery to an end. End of the story. Not listening to anything else. It's boring. It's just grifting. It's just freeloading, that's all it is. And this tirade of hatred against the English, which I've actually covered before, is so intensive and extensive that if the English don't maintain this flag rebellion and morph it into something far more significant, i.e. this is the line in the sand and we're not going beyond this, then the English are finished. And so does England have a future? Of course it has a future if the English are prepared to admit what being English means. If they're prepared to admit that being English means being white. And the Glenn Saffers of this world, whose daughter is hooked up with an African, well, at the end of the day, he's not English, is he? He's African. Okay, I'm not talking about Glenn Saffer. Although one might think so, innit, Brav Nagav? Innit, fam? You know, goodness knows what's going on in that man's horrible little head, quite frankly. But he's a repulsive specimen, and we documented that fact last night. And I don't think we need to go over Glenn Saffer too much, because we don't want to give him too much significance, because he is actually just an irrelevant little non-entity. But he personifies the problem with the centre-right. And the centre-right cannot save England. They cannot save our ethnic identity. They have no intention of doing so. And if England is clinging to the centre-right to save them, then England will die. England will be finished. Because England has no future other than through ethno-nationalism. I can tell you that for a fact. Absolutely no one, no political faction in this country can ever deal with the left and the centre-right to the extent that needs to happen other than ethno-nationalists. We will do it, guaranteed. I would do it without hesitation because I love it. I detest the left and the centre-right in equal measure because they're one and the same thing, quite frankly. Is Rupert Lowe going to save England? Never in a million years. He's a Tory, okay? He's a Tory. His immigration policy is just an imitation of what deep fake reform is doing. There's nothing meaningful there. And all this ranting about, we need to stop the boat crossings. Yes, we do need to stop the boat crossings. But legal immigration is responsible for the balkanisation of our cities, not the illegal boat crossings, okay? And over 1 million legal immigrants coming into this country a year means England will cease to exist sometime between the 2060s to the 2070s, and goodness knows what it will be called, but it certainly won't be England. Probably will be Region 41 of the New World Order, which is what they envisage, with a Free Speech Code Article 101. In other words, banned anyone who wants to talk about Englishness, English identity. Perhaps we should close tonight not with some staring, daring-do example from English history, like the Battle of Agincourt, as it were. Well, that was the French aristocracy fighting against the French aristocracy using English yeomanry. You know? Just to get your history facts right. And, yes, Lawrence Fox, that debate he had with Smurf, Steve Laws, to you, I call him Smurf because that's my pet name for him, Smurf. So yes, the debate he had with Lawrence Fox produced that memorable, absolutely notorious phrase where Lawrence said, oh, well, now, you see, the thing is, England could become 95% African, and as long as they speak English, or a variation of it, Pidgin English, or goodness knows whatever, ever will evolve from it, and adopt some of our customs, a bit of flag waving. Waving a flag doesn't mean you're English or any other bloody nationality, quite frankly. It just means you're waving a flag. That's all it is. Don't delude yourself. Yes, then, says Lawrence, then, you know, Englishness and Britishness would continue. Well, how could it possibly continue? You see, and this is the problem with the centre-right, isn't it? They believe anyone can be English, anyone can be British, exactly the same as the left. So you might think, oh, you spend an awful lot of time talking about the centre-right. Well, why do you think that is? Why do you think I spend so much time talking about the centre-right? Because this channel has succeeded in persuading several thousand people who once believed they were centre-right into realising that they're actually nationalists and not centre-right at all, and that this channel has convinced said people that there is no future for this country on the path with the centre-right, or the centre line as some people call it. There is no future. There is only oblivion. Cultural, racial, genetic, DNA, oblivion. There is no other truth. There is no other fact. And I'm here to speak those uncomfortable facts. And if people don't like it, that's just too bad. maybe could make up some nasty little songs or make up some false allegations, which is what the centre-right trash do all the time, isn't it? Because ultimately that's all they've got. They're so terrified of the truth. They're so terrified of the truth and meaningful questions that lead to the truth that they have to resort to this thoroughly bad behaviour. And for all those centre-right clowns who've said to me, oh, well, we can't afford to have your principles, we're fighting for survival. You're not fighting for survival and you have no principles. And even if you were fighting survival and you succeeded, all you would build is a nation without principle. What's the point of living in a country that is just another corrupt shithole? We're trying to get rid of one corrupt shithole, foreign occupation government based in Westminster. What's the point of replacing it with yet another cesspit of corruption, this time the centre-right? Not for me, absolutely not. I will not support that, and I will not pay lip service to it, and I will not ignore it, more importantly. I am a British nationalist, British English nationalist. I am English first and foremost. My loyalty will always be to England, but I have no loyalty whatsoever to the centre-right. And as for the clown who came on last night and said, another centre-right clown that is, you get nationalist clowns as well, quite a few, you know. But nowhere near as many as you do with the centre-right. Said centre-right clown came on last night and said, oh, you know, you're slagging off the centre-right again. Now it's Glenn Saffer. Last week it was British Lander. The week before it was this, that. I don't give a toss whether you like it or not. And I am not your brother. And I told him that last night. If you are centre-right, and you are, I am not your brother. I am your political enemy. We are diametrically opposed enemies. There is no common ground between us. The fact you fly a flag while saying 95% of England could become African and it will still be England means that you are the enemy of Englishness and you are my enemy and I am definitely your enemy. Okay? I trust that matter is unequivocally clear. I shouldn't have to keep restating it, but I have to because these people are so dumb and dim, they just don't get it. Okay? Hopefully they will get it after tonight. But in closing, I'll say this. There will always be an England if the English awaken and realise what being English really means. There will be no England under the centre-right, even if they won. There will be no England. It will simply die out slower than it would under foreign occupation government. And I argue that the centre-right, because it's a safety valve operation, is just another faction of foreign occupation government anyway. So that leaves us with ethno-nationalism. And if you don't want ethno-nationalism, then you can vote for oblivion, for extension. How does that sound? It's entirely up to you. But as things escalate, and they're going to, I absolutely assure you, they are going to get much worse than what they are right now. You will come flocking in your droves to ethno-nationalism because the ethno-nationalist ideology is already triumphing over the hollow, baseless, nihilistic centre-right and its imitation game, which is being shown up and found out day by day, particularly by people like me. And if you don't like it, then you can go and take a running jump off the White Cliffs of Dover. That's if you can find a space on the landing grounds, what with all these illegal boat crossings.